I know a lot of people have opinions. Maybe there's even some confusion. So I just want to talk about something from a not so much a collecting standpoint, but from more of a common sense and business standpoint, so that maybe people will understand a little bit better. And what I want to talk about is newsstand editions and just what the concept is around the scarcity and a couple of misconceptions, and maybe bring some things to the attention of people that they didn't know. Right after this. Okay, so like I said, I see a lot of people, and one of the things that I notice, especially like on claim sales or whatever, a lot of people want to say, like, oh, and it's a newsie. And I'm just like, dude, just because it's a newsstand doesn't really make it more valuable on its surface. On its surface. And I guess maybe because I'm older and maybe because it's from where I grew up, I have a lot more experience with newsstands because I grew up in that time where you had that crossing of, you know, where the population of comic book shops started increasing. So you had the introduction of direct version versus the newsstand versions. And I've seen what newsstands are, and I know from personal experience how stores, not comic stores, actual retail stores, how they handle magazines. So I just wanted to go, discuss this stuff because, like I said, some of this might be new information to some people. So let's get the camera set up. Okay, so we're gonna get the camera set up. Yeah, get this going, and we will bring up the screen once I can get the proper screen going. Okay, so here we go. So first thing we're gonna do is, and I know that people have talked about this to death, but I just wanted to bring this up so that people could see. Now, this is from Rare Comics. I don't know. I mean, is it still a thing? No, it doesn't look like they've had a post in some time. Well, maybe no, 11/22. Okay, so they haven't had anything in a while. But what they do have is they have a very nice, easy to read graphic, and this is what I wanted to pull up so that we could go over this part real quick. They have a nice side by side chart, and we could just bring this up so that, yeah, so you could see the complete chart. And come on. All right, that should be good enough. I think that should be good enough. Okay, so this is what we've all seen before in some form or fashion. In, up until 1979, this is the allocation of newsstands versus direct copies. And you can see the purple, the light color is newsstands. 95% of comic books were newsstands. Fast forward to 1982, the number decreases to 80%. Then we go into 86, and this is where we have that 50-50 split. This is that cross where that middle of the junction where it's literally all things are equal. Then from there, everything changes. So that's why everybody says, oh, from 1986 and forward, make sure that you have a newsstand because it's very rare. And you can see down in 2013, it's almost, or maybe is actually zero, because at some point in the 2010s, newsstand editions just stopped being made completely. Now, that's all well and good. So you could say, oh, well, everything after 1990 and forward is, it's rare, newsstand, newsy, blah, 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 all this stuff. But you also have to understand something, that these comics as well, even though, especially like in 82 and 86, when we start to see the increase of direct editions, there is something to be said for the, number one, the conditions. So let's go and take a look at some of these things that I've experienced to a degree. All right, so here, This is from a Facebook group called Do You Remember When? From August 16, 2022. This is, and you can see it's a store. It looks like a store in the 1970s. It says, remember when every drugstore had comic books? I do remember this. Every drugstore had a spinner rack just like this. And you could see the comics are how I don't have a Facebook account, so I don't really not under this my the quote unquote business identity or whatever. So yeah, but you can see here that you have the spinner rack. Everybody's seen these before. I know Otto has one of these in his base, in his grotto. Otto from 3 Men in the Basement. He's got one of these where he keeps some comic books. But this is what some stores had. When it says drugstores, like it says right here, when every drugstore. I don't know about where a lot of you guys grew up or what time frame you grew up in. Like I said, I was born in the late 70s, so I grew up in the 80s when I was a kid. I'm an 80s/early 90s kid, and we had drugstores. So don't think of like CVS or Walgreens. Those aren't drugstores. When we talk about drugstores, we're talking about mainly a pharmacy and then a bunch of other things. CVS and Walgreens, those are commercialized things. Those are national chains. It's not the same thing. We're talking about like one-off places, mom and pop shops where you would go in there and you could find anything. CVS and Walgreens are modernized corporate culture ripoffs of the old school drugstores. So, we would go in and we would find these things and we would have this. They would be on a spinner, no bags and boards, no anything. Just sitting there, edges laying on the edges of the rails, corners being bumped as you try to get it, try to fit the books into the thing. Because all they would do is they would get a bundle of books, and then they would just take the stack and then stick them all into the slots, as you can see, like right over here. Each one of these slots, they would just see this little group of books. They would just take each one of these as a bundle, pick it up, grab it, and then stick it in there. So there was no care for handling. There was no care for packaging for the most part, and there was no care for storage. So that's number one. What people don't realize is that the treatment of these books, even in stores themselves. Now, this is the first part. Here's another thing that a lot of people don't know. This is courtesy of a Medium page called Paco Taylor. Paco Taylor. You can see here. So go give them a follow. The date and all that stuff, it's meaningless. The image is what we're looking for. And this is an image of a newsstand in 1975. This is what I saw when I was growing up, and I would go into Manhattan or Brooklyn or Queens for anything. You would have an outdoor stand exposed to the elements, and they would just have, you can see, here's GI Combat. Here you have Giant Size Werewolf by Night, Giant Size Dracula, Giant Size Chillers, Tomb of Dracula, I would guess that would be Defenders, Frankenstein Monster. I mean, obviously this guy's predominantly showcasing Marvel. You see Iron Fist down here. So you can see that this is all from the 70s. So this is not like somebody trying to recreate something, because you would not be seeing these. But again, same thing with this. You could see all of these copies. These are all the same copies. What they would do is they would get them in bundles. They would take them and stick them in there. Now, this is just it's a wood rack with some, maybe some wire frame or something, just to keep the books spaced up. But again, exposed to the elements, no protection whatsoever. Sure, at the end of the day, they would close up. You would fold down the wooden flap, lock it up or whatever. Maybe if it rained, you would bring down a tarp. But for the most part, they were exposed to the elements. Here's another one. This is from Digital Comics Museum website forum. And which is the one that I'm looking for. Okay, so it's this panel, but these are the books, I think. One of these are. Give me a second. Okay, so here you could see, like, and this is older, but it's the same thing. It's an outdoor newsstand, and I know one of these had the DC comics. I'm trying to see. Well, here's Star Comics, Popular Comics. So these are all in the 30s, probably 30s and 40s. But again, it's the same thing. They're just okay. So this is from 1939, probably, because you can see 1939 Cars, Collier's magazine here. See if I can make this a little bigger without distorting it too much. So yeah, you can see Collier's 1939 Cars, and you can see here, this is the front of a storefront. So this is all street side. So where you know where you got where Street Side Anthony got his ideas for your street side sales and the name Street Side Anthony, it's literally from this, because these comic book these newsstands were literally street side in New York City. And here you could see, okay, all action stories, a bunch of others from the 90s. From 1939. I can't really make out a bunch of them. But you just have, magazines, comic books, all just sitting there, exposed to the elements. Some of them, you can see here, some of these newspapers are being held by clothespins on a rope. And so this goes to the first part of the thing that I want to discuss with everybody, is that, look, not only are the newsstand copies more rare in the later eras, but in the earlier eras, they're even more rare than the publication runs say, because all of these books, they were exposed to elements at newsstands. They were exposed to little kids. Like, we would go in there, we would spin the spinner and see how many times it could rotate or whatever. What happens then? The comic books are going to sit there and bang against the edges as we give it centrifugal force one way, and then we stop it, and the books come and smack against the edge as we're playing with it. Now, this is when we were little kids, not as we were older, when we started collecting and knowing what was going on. So that's the first thing. The second thing that you got to realize is what happens when a retail establishment, let's say a newsstand or a mom and pop shop, what happens every month? They get a new supply of magazines, the newest supply of comic books, whether it's monthly, bi-monthly, semi-monthly, quarterly, whatever the case may be. What happened to those books when when the new month came out? They weren't saving them. Anything that wasn't sold, they would get a credit from the publisher. How does that work? I'm going to tell you, and you're going to be surprised, because this is how it worked in my experience when I've seen things happen. When I first moved down to Florida, I was between, obviously, I didn't have a job lined up or anything like that. So I got a job at Office Max, working in the shipping department, in the receiving department. And we were in charge for receiving, shipping back damaged products, all that stuff. But what we also did was, every time we got the delivery of the magazines, we would have to send back the old ones to get credit for stuff that didn't sell. Now, we weren't sending back the whole magazine. What we did was, we would tear off the cover, and I'm not going to take off a comic book and show you how I do that. But basically what happened was, we would take the covers and tear them off, throw out the pulp, and take the stack of the covers and give them back to the distributor. That way we could get credits for that. That's how they do with comic books. Comic books were the same way. Anything that you see on these newsstands, we'll go back to the newsstands. Not this guy, because this is magazine. This is newspapers. I don't know how that works. All of these all these books, magazines, or whatever, if these didn't sell, the covers would get ripped off. And now this is what I'm speculating, because I don't think anything would change. But they would return them in some form or fashion for a credit, because A, they had to make room for the next month, and B, they had to get their money back for stuff that didn't sell. It's basically, back then, it wasn't so much like it is with comic shops, where comic shops place orders for books that they're going to sell, and if they don't sell, they have to hold them. Back then, with the newsstands, and the mom and pop drugstores and everything, the premise was it was almost like consignment. You would get them, pay them, the store would buy, they would pay their subscription price, then they would get the subscriptions in the store, put them on display. Whatever didn't sell would then go back to the distributor, give the mom and pop shop or the newsstand operator a credit, and then they would free up the room and the money to buy the new stock. And it would be like that over and over and over again. It would just be a rotating process. Now, what that means is, assuming that everything stayed the same, either they sent back the comic books in total, in their completeness, or they ripped off the cover, sent the cover back, and we're left with coverless books. That means all the publication numbers that you've ever seen for newsstand versions are going to be dramatically less, because those are gross publication numbers. That means the numbers that were printed. There's no telling how many were destroyed in the credit process, in the life cycle is what it is, really. You make you have the subscription, it comes to you, you sell whatever you can, whatever you don't, you send back. Either they destroyed it at the publisher's level, or like I said, you destroyed it on your side, threw out the books, and sent back the covers. So that's going to reduce the population. Combine that with the fact that, again, these are all outdoors. All of these, all these newsstands, they were all outdoors for the most part. And then the ones that are indoors, no bags and boards, exposed to elements, exposed to children. I say pets. Maybe back then, if you had, pets were allowed into some of these stores, they get around and start sniffing around stuff. I don't know. But the point is that newsstands are not just valuable because of the differentiation in the publication numbers. They're even more rare than you think of in higher grades because of all of these reasons: exposure to the elements, the destruction of non-sold stock. I don't think a lot of these people in the late 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and even 70s had the idea, hey, we should probably keep these. Because A, they need space to sell their new stock. B, they need their money back because, they didn't view them as investments. So what's going to happen is when you see somebody, say, oh, it's a newsie. Yeah, on the surface, it's, just because of the volume that was published, they could be, more valuable later on. But the earlier editions, we'll go back to the chart just so that we can look at this again. We'll see. I mean, there's all kinds of variations of this chart. But so even if you have 90% of the publication run was newsstands, you have to think, let's say there was 10,000 printed of any given book. Let's say 10% of them were damaged because of, the way that they were kept or, exposure. So that brings us down to, so we're already at 90,000, 9,000 of them were newsstand versus, well, maybe 9,200, let's say. Take off another 10%. So that's another $1,000. That's 8,200 of them that remain. Now let's take off another, 25, 30% for returns. So now you're talking about another 25, 3,000 off of the 85. Let's say that's 5,000. Out of originally 10,000 print run, we could, safely assume maybe half of those were left in the market, period. I'm not talking about in high quality. I'm talking about just period. Removing the returns and then the damaged books that people threw out because they were damaged from the off the rack and they were never even sold. So, keep that in mind, and then you'll see why people put a premium on newsstands. Not just because they say, "Oh, it's a newsie," which I can't stand that term anyway. It just sounds so cheesy. But yeah, that's why you see a lot of people when they say, "Oh, I got a book here. Look at this. This is a Silver Sable #1. I was excited. I was actually excited to get this because it was a newsstand edition. Well, yeah, Silver Sable was from 1992. That was literally what? Like junk era. Yeah, but guess what? In 1990s, between 92 and 95, here, you have, what are we looking at? Between 1990 over here, maybe 13%. If we look at 1995, 9%. So somewhere in there, let's say this is a 10% of the print run. You know, this does carry a premium because it is a rarity in that regard. Now, again, in the 1990s, we've had comic shops already. So odds are that these books were, even if they weren't bagged and boarded when they came from the distributor, they were going on a shelf that was a little bit more book friendly, more conservationally thinking. Not just sitting there, put outdoors for the, to be exposed to the elements and everything like that. And even in the 90s, I'm pretty sure I remember most of the direct editions were being bagged and boarded, but these were going off to still like CVS mom and pop stores that weren't treating them as great. So the direct copies were being treated a lot better than the newsstands in this day and age. So again, just trying to bring a little bit more of the context around, I guess maybe more of a historical lesson, perhaps. I just like to bring a little more context into the discussion, more so than just saying, well, it's a newsstand, and depending on which of these time periods we're looking at, newsstands shouldn't be valued as high. But I think we just witnessed why, even in the earlier days of the direct copies, the direct issue publications, that there is a reason why these numbers, when you look at what survived, are going to be a lot lower. So, it comes a little bit more in line with, with this year right here, because again, thinking about maybe 30, 40, 50% of the newsstand stock. So this is what was published. See here, newsstand versus direct edition percentages at distribution. It's impossible to know because no one's really going to have the data, but we can realistically and reasonably assume that these percentages are, let's see. So my left hand is okay. So if you're looking at me like this, it's going to come up a little bit closer because this newsstand is going to come down in what survived, and the direct percentages are going to go up after all this time. So, just, I know people like to simplify things a lot and just throw out, oh, newsstand, more money. There's a reason why. There are other things that come into play more so than just this the percentages at distribution. We have to put a little bit more thought into what happened after the distribution. Where were they distributed to? What happened to those books? Because a lot of them are not in the market anymore. A lot of them you're not going to see. It's one of those things. They were destroyed. And if they weren't destroyed, you're not going to see a lot of high grades, which is why a lot of the high grade books end up going for a huge amount of money. But that's it. I know in the last video, I think I said I was either going to review Midtown Comics after my last purchase with them. Either I was going to do either that video or this one. If I had said that I was going to do the Midtown, there's a reason why I'm doing this one first. It's because I actually made another purchase at Midtown, which you're going to see in probably 2 or 3 videos. I wanted to see if I can replicate the luck that I got with the Uncanny X-Men, the Bronze Age X-Men, if I could repeat that stuff with some early to mid bronze Avengers and some bronze, bronze Alpha Flights. So that's why we're doing this one now. If you were expecting, if there's a little bit of a disconnect between the videos, that's why. Hey, I want to know what your thoughts are. How, if you're processing this information the same way I do, in more of a full context business scope type of deal, more so than just saying, oh, Newsstand, rare, direct, not so rare at one point, or going the opposite way, before 1986. I want to know what your thoughts are, how you perceive this. I know that some people have said, and I think I might have mentioned this before, Chris at Journos Comics. I know that he has said in the past, if all things considered, and there's a close proximity in pricing, he would take the newsstands. But if there was a big disconnect in the pricing, he wouldn't pay the premium for a newsstand copy. But this is exactly why I like to talk about these things and expand on those things, because there are reasons why newsstands can and do sometimes demand a significant premium. But I don't want to drone on anymore. We'll end it there. Next video is another unboxing, and then we'll see what happens after that. I'm not exactly sure, but thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.